In the winter darkness of 1916, a body surfaced from the Neva River, swollen, frozen, battered by violence, and already surrounded by whispers. Russia recognized Grigory Rasputin at once because the beard, the eyes, the scandal, and the terrible name were unmistakable. The first rumors sounded impossible, but they spread through Petrograd faster than evidence, fear, or official denials. They said Rasputin swallowed cyanide, ate poisoned cakes, drank poisoned wine, rose after being shot, staggered into the snow, and still refused to die. By morning, Russia had gained a legend stronger than police reports, stronger than witnesses, and stronger than death itself. His murder felt like Gothic cinema, with a palace, a secret basement, poisoned wine, blood in the snow, and a river swallowing the truth. Yet the greater mystery begins far from palaces, in the hard emptiness of Siberia, where power felt distant and almost unreal. Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin was born in 1869 in Pokrovskoye, a village of brutal winters, poor roads, religious fear, and peasant hardship. He was not born for court life, politics, or influence, because he entered the world as a peasant with little formal education. Stories from his youth describe him as rough, drunken, unruly, and already surrounded by the blurred line between fact and rumor. As a young man, Rasputin became a wandering pilgrim, walking to monasteries, holy places, and remote shrines across Russia. He listened to monks, prayed with peasants, absorbed religious language, and returned to his village with a strange new spiritual intensity. He was still rough around the edges, but now he seemed charged with purpose, and some believed he could calm suffering. Others thought he was theatrical, clever, and dangerous, because Russia had always left space for wandering holy men to attract devotion. Rasputin was not a priest, and he was not truly a monk, but he occupied a powerful and unstable middle ground. To believers, he was a guide sent by God, while skeptics saw a fraud using sacred words to mask appetite, ambition, and manipulation. That uncertainty became the center of his power, because he could speak like a prophet and behave like a peasant. He ignored rank, humbled aristocrats, carried the smell of the road, and turned his lack of refinement into an unsettling form of authority. When Rasputin reached St. Petersburg, he entered a city that was magnificent, nervous, and already cracking beneath the surface. Palaces glowed beside factories, aristocrats danced while revolutionaries organized, and police spies watched cafes, universities, newspapers, and religious circles. Into this atmosphere walked a Siberian peasant with burning eyes and no respect for the invisible rules of status. He spoke bluntly, treated rank like a costume, and fascinated a society that both despised and desired something rawer than courtly manners. Rasputin entered drawing rooms that should have been closed to him, and religious aristocrats treated him as a living spiritual curiosity. Bored elites wanted danger wrapped in holiness, and Rasputin gave them that mixture with blessings, scolding, whispers, and unnerving confidence. Every insult made him more interesting, and every scandal made him harder to ignore, because outrage became part of the attraction. Soon his name reached the imperial family, where private fear, religious longing, and political weakness were waiting for exactly someone like him. Tsar Nicholas II ruled Russia with inherited authority, sincere faith, and limited political imagination. He believed deeply in autocracy and sacred duty, but he disliked confrontation and often seemed overwhelmed by the immense pressure of governing a restless empire. His wife, Empress Alexandra, was German-born, intensely religious, and mistrusted by many Russians who never fully accepted her. Court society found her cold and proud, while she saw the court as shallow, cruel, spiritually empty, and hostile to her family. The imperial couple had 4 daughters before the long-awaited son finally arrived, bringing hope to a dynasty obsessed with succession. Alexei was the heir to the Romanov throne, and his birth should have secured the future, but instead it introduced a private terror into the palace. The boy suffered from hemophilia, a disease that prevented blood from clotting properly and turned childhood into constant danger. A small injury could become a mortal crisis, a bruise could swell into agony, and a childish fall could threaten the future of Russia itself. The imperial household hid the truth, because weakness inside the ruling family was politically dangerous and personally unbearable. Doctors could not give Alexandra certainty, and each attack left the family helpless, sleepless, desperate, and terrified that the heir might die. Then Rasputin appeared near the family and changed the emotional balance inside the palace in a way no minister could match. When Alexei suffered, Rasputin prayed, spoke calmly, promised the boy would live, and gave Alexandra something medicine had failed to provide. The reason for Alexei's improvements remains debated, and the truth may be less supernatural than the legends surrounding them. Rasputin may have reduced panic, encouraged rest, stopped harmful treatments, or simply arrived during recoveries that had already begun. But Alexandra saw a miracle at the exact moment she needed one, and that mattered more than explanation or medical logic. From then on, Rasputin was not merely a visitor or spiritual advisor, but the man who might keep her son alive. This gave him a power no minister could easily understand, because it was not a title, office, uniform, or legal appointment. It was emotional authority inside the most private room in Russia, built from a mother's terror and a dynasty's hidden vulnerability. Alexandra trusted him because fear had made her dependent, and Nicholas tolerated him because Alexandra believed in him. The court resented him, priests hated him, ministers feared him, and the public hated him before it even knew the truth. The more enemies attacked Rasputin, the more Alexandra defended him as a persecuted man of God. Warnings sounded like hatred, criticism sounded like conspiracy, and scandal sounded like an attack on the only man who could help her child. This created a fatal spiral inside the palace, where every accusation strengthened her loyalty and every defense deepened public suspicion. In that trap, Rasputin's legend grew larger than his actual power and more damaging than any single decision. By the early 1910s, Rasputin's reputation had become politically poisonous, and his name carried scandal into every room. Newspapers, salons, police reports, and court gossip said he seduced noblewomen, drank heavily, boasted about secrets, corrupted religion, appointed ministers, and ruined officials. Some accusations were false, some were exaggerated, and some were partly true, which made them harder to dismiss. Rasputin did drink, boast, manipulate, accept favors, and write notes for petitioners, while also helping ordinary people who begged for access. In a collapsing political culture, appearances became reality, and Rasputin became a symbol before he became a corpse. The first serious attempt on his life came in 1914, when Europe was moving toward war and Russia was already trembling. A woman named Kionia Guseva believed Rasputin was a force of evil and approached him in Pokrovskoye with a knife. On June the 29th, she stabbed him in the abdomen with terrifying force, leaving a wound so severe that many expected him to die. Rasputin survived, and the timing made the story feel almost supernatural to later generations who wanted history to behave like Omen. The very next day, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, and Europe began moving rapidly toward the First World War. While recovering from the knife wound, Rasputin warned against Russian involvement in the coming conflict. Whether this was prophecy, instinct, or later exaggeration, the warning endured because the war would do more than damage Russia. Russia entered the war with courage, but its weaknesses were brutal and quickly exposed by modern conflict. The army was enormous, yet logistics were fragile. Soldiers lacked weapons and boots, railways strained, cities suffered shortages, and families waited for men who never returned. Defeat turned patriotism into bitterness, and every failure demanded a face to blame in a country drowning in loss. Rasputin became that face because a strange holy man near the throne was easier to understand than the empire's deeper military, political, and social breakdown. In 1915, Nicholas made a disastrous choice by leaving the capital to take personal command of the army. He believed this was sacred duty, but it tied his prestige directly to battlefield failure and left Alexandra with greater influence in Petrograd. Alexandra was already isolated, suspicious, and dependent on Rasputin's guidance, so the arrangement looked disastrous to outsiders. Ministers came and went in rapid succession, the government appeared unstable, and rumor filled every gap the monarchy refused to explain. The court seemed disconnected from soldiers and civilians alike, and Alexandra's letters urged Nicholas to trust our friend. That phrase meant Rasputin, and to outsiders it looked like proof that the empire was being guided by a peasant mystic. Some whispered that Alexandra was secretly helping Germany, a rumor that was unfair, poisonous, and politically devastating. Others insisted Rasputin controlled her completely and that every appointment or failure could be traced back to his influence. By 1960, Rasputin had become the face of national decay, humiliation, and palace corruption. Conservatives saw him as a stain on monarchy. Liberals saw proof of autocratic madness, revolutionaries saw perfect propaganda, and ordinary people saw a palace living outside reality. Several aristocrats decided that killing Rasputin might save Russia, even though the crisis was far deeper than one man. Their belief was desperate, but it gave murder a patriotic mask and turned conspiracy into a performance of loyalty. The most famous conspirator was Prince Felix Yusupov, fabulously rich, theatrical, and married into the imperial family. Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich joined him, along with Vladimir Purishkovich, a right-wing politician who believed Rasputin had to disappear. Yusupov invited Rasputin to his palace on the Moika Canal, a place of elegance, wealth, secrecy, and fatal theater. According to the prince, Rasputin expected a private meeting with Yusupov's wife, though that detail may have been polished or invented later. What matters is that Rasputin entered the palace alive and was led into a prepared basement room. Upstairs, conspirators waited and listened, while downstairs, the man they feared moved toward the scene that would make him immortal. Yusupov later claimed that cakes and wine had been poisoned with cyanide, turning hospitality into a trap. He said Rasputin ate the cakes without visible effect, drank the wine, continued talking, and left the prince confused by the apparent failure of death itself. The poison should have killed him quickly, yet in Yusupov's version, Rasputin remained patient, restless, and almost impossible to read. This is the moment that made the myth unforgettable, because the holy sinner seemed to swallow death and survive. Historians have questioned the poison story for good reasons, and the simplest explanation may be the least cinematic. The poison may never have been used, may have been used incorrectly, or may have been weakened before Rasputin ever touched it. Eventually, Yusupov took a revolver and fired, and the bullet struck Rasputin hard enough to drop him to the floor. The conspirators believed the act was complete, and for a moment, the basement seemed to hold its breath. Then, according to Yusupov, Rasputin moved again, opened his eyes, and lunged toward the prince. The story may be literal truth, theatrical memory, or self-serving drama, but it gave history one of its most unforgettable images. Yusupov fled in terror, and Purishkevich chased Rasputin into the courtyard with a gun as panic tore through the plan. More shots were fired. One bullet struck Rasputin from behind as he tried to escape, and another may have struck his head. At last, he collapsed in the snow, and the conspirators handled the body with panic and confusion rather than calm purpose. Some accounts say he was struck or beaten again before being wrapped, transported through the winter city, and dumped into the Neva River. The river became the final stage of the legend, because even death was not allowed to remain simple. The autopsy evidence confirmed violence, gunshots, and concealment, but it never fully proved every dramatic detail told afterward. Rasputin probably did not survive poison, multiple bullets, and drowning in the exact sequence popular culture remembers. Yet, uncertainty made the story stronger, because every contradiction became another doorway into imagination, and every doubt made him harder to bury. When his body was discovered, Petrograd erupted with speculation, fear, excitement, and a hunger for impossible details. People said he clawed beneath the ice, freed himself from bindings, struggled against the river, or died making the sign of the cross in the freezing water. Others suspected the assassins had invented parts of the story to impress history and excuse their own terror. Police investigated, but rumor outran evidence because the public wanted a death worthy of Rasputin and received one. The imperial couple reacted with grief, anger, and a sense of spiritual betrayal that deepened their isolation. Alexandra saw Rasputin's murder as a sacred crime, while Nicholas understood that men from his own elite had openly defied the authority of the throne. Yet the punishment was weak because the killers were too connected to destroy completely without embarrassing the dynasty further. Yusupov was sent away to his estate, Grand Duke Dmitry was removed from the capital, and many Russians saw privilege protecting murder. The assassination did not restore confidence in the monarchy because it proved even aristocrats no longer trusted the palace. It showed that private violence had entered high politics and that the imperial family could no longer control its own circle. Rasputin had been removed, but the problems remained untouched and continued gathering force beneath the surface. The army still bled, cities still lacked bread, ministers still looked temporary, and public anger still pressed beneath the empire like cracking ice. Rasputin died in December 1916, and the Romanov dynasty fell in March 1917, leaving almost no distance between murder and revolution. Less than 3 months separated the assassination from collapse, giving the story a final symmetry that made the legend even more powerful. The assassins had claimed they were saving the throne, but they had only staged one last scandal before collapse. Nicholas abdicated as strikes, mutiny, and political revolt overwhelmed the regime, and the old autocracy vanished with astonishing speed. In 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their children were executed, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule. Rasputin's murder had taken place in a basement, and the dynasty ended in another basement, as if history were echoing with cruelty. This connection preserved the myth of Rasputin's prophecy, which said that nobles killing him would doom the Romanovs. The authenticity of that warning remains uncertain, but it endured because events seemed to confirm it with frightening precision. Rasputin did not destroy Imperial Russia by himself, because no mystic, fraud, or holy man could break an empire alone. War, hunger, repression, inequality, political rigidity, weak administration, and exhausted soldiers had already damaged Russia far beyond one man's influence. Nicholas was too inflexible for reform. Alexandra was too isolated to read public opinion, and the bureaucracy was too weak for modern war. Rasputin did not create those conditions, but he revealed them with devastating clarity. His real power came from proximity to vulnerability, not from supernatural command or formal authority. He stood beside a sick child, a terrified mother, a hesitant ruler, and a palace that hid its deepest weakness from the nation it claimed to lead. That position made him look larger than he was, while also making him genuinely influential in moments that mattered. He could recommend, plead, warn, and manipulate, but he could not command armies, rebuild railways, or feed starving cities. Rasputin's story is therefore a story about secrecy, because Alexei's illness was hidden and Alexandra's dependence was denied. The court's panic was hidden behind ritual, military failures were softened by official language, and public suffering was underestimated. Into those silences rushed rumor, suspicion, and hatred, and Rasputin lived inside that darkness. When truth is concealed, the most frightening story often wins, especially in a country already searching for signs that power has gone mad. He also represented an unbearable social inversion, because a peasant entered the private world of emperors and frightened those born to rule. Rasputin brought the village into the imperial bedroom, rough speech into polished rooms, and religious ecstasy into bureaucratic politics. The elite wanted peasants obedient and distant, but Rasputin was neither, and that made him intolerable. He showed how thin the barrier was between sacred monarchy and ordinary human fear, and the court hated him for revealing it. After his death, everyone used Rasputin for their own meaning, because the legend was too useful to leave alone. Monarchists blamed him for corrupting the old order, revolutionaries used him as proof of decay, foreign newspapers turned him into madness, and filmmakers made him supernatural. Popular culture stripped away uncertainty and kept the spectacle of poison, bullets, snow, and the river. The real man became harder to see, while the legend became easier to sell and impossible to completely kill. Yet the real man matters because he is more disturbing than the monster invented after his death. He was not pure evil and not a saint, because he comforted some people, exploited others, and survived through the weaknesses of everyone around him. The murderers believed they were cutting poison from the body of Russia, but the body was already infected. Killing Rasputin could not supply armies, feed cities, restore trust, make Nicholas decisive, or transform autocracy into a modern state. Their act was dramatic, not strategic, which is why it failed almost immediately and became another sign of collapse. The phrase, "the man who refused to die," survives because Rasputin refused to die in imagination, propaganda, films, songs, novels, and documentaries. In the end, Rasputin died like a man, not a supernatural creature immune to fear, pain, or blood. He could bleed, panic, suffer, fall, be dragged through the night, hidden in a frozen river, and found as a battered corpse beneath Russia's winter. But the world around him needed something larger than a man, and history gave it Rasputin. The Romanovs needed a miracle, the aristocrats needed a villain, the public needed an explanation, and the revolution needed a symbol. Rasputin was not powerful because he was immortal, but he became immortal because Russia was collapsing around him. A frightened court raised him up, a furious elite struck him down, and a wounded empire turned his death into myth. The assassins tried to bury him beneath the ice, but they buried the last illusion that the monarchy could save itself. The body surfaced, and so did the truth, because the man was dead, but the warning remained. When leaders hide weakness, rumor becomes stronger than fact, and when power isolates itself, it begins to seek miracles. When elites confuse murder with reform, collapse only moves faster, and Rasputin's story becomes more than a strange death. A sick child, a desperate mother, a weak ruler, and a broken empire created the legend that followed him into history. Poison and bullets ended his life, but not his usefulness, and that is why Grigory Rasputin still refuses to die.